Welcome to Coming from Left Field, where we have conversations about politics, books, and current events with your host, Greg Goddles and Pat Cummings. In the fall of 1959, Harvard admitted an unprecedented 18 young Negro men to the freshman class. 4 years later, they would graduate as African Americans, changing themselves and changing Harvard. Many decades later, one of these fellows, with the help of his partner, went on a quest to reconnect with these classmates, explore lives and what time at Harvard had meant. This makes for a very good story. Well, warm greetings, everybody. Very excited to have this podcast with Ken Garrett and Jeanne Ellsworth, and a wonderful book Greg and I read about a year ago is The Last Negroes at Harvard. And 10 years ago, I was in middle school. Greg, where were you in 1963, 64?
Likewise, junior high.
Junior high.
We call it
And
junior high.
Jeanne, how about you? 1963, 64?
High school, just started high school, I think.
And
Oh,
Kent?
no, wait, that's not right. I was in 7th grade.
Oh,
So it's
okay,
English.
there you go. So Kent, how about you? What were you doing?
In what year?
63, 64.
63.
Well, 63, I was
Graduating.
graduating and then I was headed to NYU Medical School for a year.
Good.
That's what I was doing. So clearly I'm the oldest person, I guess, on this call.
Right.
But we're all old.
We're all old. Your book is absolutely wonderful. The Last Negro at Harvard. And I say your book, it's both of you,
Right.
your book.
Right.
Kent, you get the bigger lettering, but there's no doubt that this is a collaboration and a real work of love. It is a story of 18 young men that entered Harvard back in 59, and they went into Harvard as Negroes, which is what we called Black people at that time, but left as quite changed the Harvard Institute and changed themselves. Tell me about how you decided on this book, you two.
Go ahead, you can start.
No,
I'll
well,
start.
you were
Well,
getting out of farm.
yeah, I was getting out of farming, and I've been farming. First I worked in TV news for about 20 years plus. I was at CBS and NBC, right, evening news as a news broadcaster, and in about 1996 or something, 97. I was on the subway coming back from New York City, NBC from Manhattan, and I decided that I had to get out of it. I was on a hot subway. So I decided to go up and farm, and I moved to Delhi, and I bought a farm and started farming, and I did cows for about 10 years. And then after that, one gets older, and I, figuring out what to do next. And I decided to see what had happened to some of my classmates at Harvard. I'd gotten a notice that one classmate had died. Harvard sends out this Harvard magazine every month, or every 2 months, I guess. And you, at this age, everybody goes to look at the obituaries to see who's still left in the class. And a good friend of mine had died, who'd been in an earlier class. So I started thinking about what was happening, what happened to everybody. So decided to look them up, and it started off as kind of a video, and Jeanne and I worked on that. And I'll let you talk about your part.
Well, my background is in history of education. And so when Kent started talking about this project, I thought, oh, this is a good fit. I would like to be involved in it. And so at the same time, we had just met, on internet dating, if you could believe that.
That's
And I was kind of looking for,
that's how it goes pretty much anymore. I don't know if you
I
know,
know.
but that's how it goes.
So I was looking for a new start too. And this project just interested me. I don't want to say that more than Kent, but it was sort of a, it was a reason to say, yeah, let's have a second date or then a third. And I think it was a good match because I've done a lot of interviewing of people and researching in archives and things like that. And he had contacts with the individuals and he had his own experiences to share. So it was a nice way to work together.
And the guys, they were spread out in, I think, about 10 different cities or 10 different cities in the States. And one classmate was in Austria, who we traveled to see him. And another one was in St. Thomas. And we went down and interviewed him. So we ended up with the video. We made about a 23-minute thing we called sort of a sample trailer. And the idea was that we would go back and try and raise some money to to do a larger, longer, more theatrical kind of documentary. And I was not very good, and we were not very good at raising money and trying to raise money. And, so we put it aside for a while and did some other projects, video projects and documentary projects. And then thinking about it, a few years later, we decided that it probably would make more sense as a book. And we put a proposal together. And actually, I had a email query that I sent one morning to about 3 different agents that had said that they would accept unsolicited ideas for projects. And I sent it out at about 8 o'clock, and at about 8:10, this guy had called and said, yeah, let's do it. And we went down to New York. We had an agent, and it took us about, a year to do a proposal. And he sent it out to, I guess, 3 different publishing houses. And Houghton Mifflin Harcourt liked it and bought the book. And then we decided writing, and the writing took another
year and a half.
About another year and a half or so. I mean, the nice thing was that we had, during the video processing, we had done transcripts and had a lot of audio of all of the guys. And so that helped us in writing the book. And again, the difficulty in writing the book was one of structure and how do you deal with 10 different characters. And Jeanne was very excellent about that in terms of how to structure it.
I often refer to myself as the architect of the book because if we had simply written 18 life stories, it would have been 1,000 pages long and rather tedious, to say the least.
It's a really classy book, but I was curious. It's a top-notch publisher. Why did they deny you an index? I mean, after I finished the book, I wanted to go back and check on people and see how they
I
connect.
don't know.
Well, I think we never really thought about it.
No.
It wasn't a question of them denying us. We just really didn't. I don't
Never
know.
thought, I mean, I
Yeah.
had done academic books before and had done indexing, and maybe that's why it never occurred to me. I never wanted to do it.
You don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
You should have done
I
it.
mean, one of the classmates did ask about that. Why did you put an index in?
Yeah.
We probably should have, maybe.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
wonderful
I
book.
get I get the feeling that it's a couple of books. Obviously, it's a memoir. People
Right.
are looking back. Eric Erickson, who's a developmental psychologist, said, this is a time of people looking at integrity of their lives. Did it have meaning? Did it,
Right,
was it
right.
worthwhile? And I really got the feeling that was a good part about this. Of where are we? What is this all about? The other thing that I got the feeling is this is a road book, because you two got in the car
Right.
and I could just see you arguing in the car and talking and who's
Right,
going over
exactly.
here and who's going there and people taking
Exactly.
notes.
Yeah.
And it became kind of a neat journey of you two, I'm sure, establishing a pretty darn good partnership and relationship as you're going through this.
Right. Right.
And I got the feeling that it was that. The third thing that I see in this book is it's a history of civil rights. It's the difference between being in middle school and college and high school. This was a really remarkable time of transition.
Right, right.
I'm looking back on my high school. I'm sure Greg, you too. A lot of things happened pretty quickly then, and
Right.
that's interesting too.
Right.
So
It was just every when I started doing this architecture project, there were so many times when I said, Kent, you're not going to believe this. This happened while you were there. And he would say, oh, right. Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. Another thing that you referred to earlier was I went to college exactly 10 years later, and things had changed so dramatically
right.
in the college environment. In my college, you could buy Muhammad Speaks in the student union, and there were whole dorms with Black students only, and just so dramatically different.
I mean, in terms of the travel, I mean, I would say you're so correct about the idea of the road trip, and that we have a little apartment down in Mexico, in a town called San Cristobal de las Casas, which is in Chiapas. It's down near the Guatemalan border. And we've been going there for about the last 7 or 8 years, and we drive. And it's 3 days of driving in the States and 2 days of driving in Mexico. And that's where we wrote a lot of the book, and that's where we came up with the title and that sort of stuff. So that's really true, correct about that.
Yeah, I got the feeling too, we all kind of are snooping on what's going on with our classmates. A year ago during COVID, I went through my whole yearbook and did an index of all the 300 and some people in my class. And that was interesting how you went back and started with the yearbook and who was in our class. And I thought it was kind of funny. You couldn't tell who's Black or not. And you, was this really, was it 16? Was it 19? Was this guy Black? Was this guy not? How did you go about?
Well, the thing is, we started the way we figured out who, I mean, I knew about 5 or 6 guys that I remember.
I think you knew more than that.
Well, probably more than that.
10
Maybe 10, yeah, that I knew. And then 2 or 3 of them lived nearby, lived in New York State. And I'd been in touch with periodically. But the yearbook pictures are these black and white little sort of passport-like pictures. And I used that as a criteria to figure out who was Black. And I came up with the number 17. So we were calling the project the Black 17 for a few years or so. And then we put the class puts out a sort of a little newsletter every few months or so, every, I guess, 4 or 5 months, with what's going on with members of the class. And we put in there, we put a little item in there saying that if anyone, we were working on this book, and if anyone remembered or had stories to talk about, to tell us about the 17 guys, let us know. And we want to put it in the book. And so we got a note back from a guy saying that 17, there's more than 17. It was like, I think this guy said there were 19. And I just said, holy crap. I mean, this is a big error here. And so I went back
the whole book.
and went through the, pictures again. And I ended up making this very uncomfortable phone call to some of these classmates saying, ending with, by the way, are you Black? And, some of these guys would say no. And I'd say, okay, thank you. Until finally we figured, I found the guy who, Jerry Secundi, who you probably couldn't tell is Black if you looked at him. And he was the 18th, and so we came up with the 18 number. And so we had a little joke as we were working on the book. Whenever a knock occurred at the door in the hotel or here at home, we knew it was obviously someone trying to get into the book. So very worried the whole time that we would end up with 25 or something like that. I mean, because you're Black, you're Black sort of, you can say you're Black if you're Black. And it turns out that Jerry he hadn't hung out with any of the black kids. And there's a quote from him in the book where he says that my mother didn't send me up here to this Ivy school to just, resegregate. He was more into integration.
Right.
So that's how I missed him.
And he went through his life having to say, hi, he said, oh, this is what I say. Hi, I'm Jerry, I'm a Negro.
Yeah, just to sort of, not have to
Get it straight, get it going. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's hard to tell. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Sammy Sosa lately, have you?
Sammy Sosa?
No, no.
Oh, goodness gracious. Sammy Sosa was such a, strong black, handsome guy from the Dominican Republic. And apparently
Yeah.
he's doing the Michael Jackson thing. So you couldn't,
Oh, really?
yeah, that's maybe that's not totally related, but it is related as how do you really tell what someone is?
Right,
and,
right,
it's
exactly.
complicated. So
What fascinated me, I think Kent knows this because we talked before about it, is how this connects with the philosophy of affirmative action. And I agree with Jeanne when I'm 1969 in graduate school. Yeah, 1969 in graduate school. And everything was different, but not in my department. I was a first year philosophy student and there were no black people in that class. The conservative folks and the liberals in the philosophy department decided after butting horns, they wanted to integrate it. So the following year, there were 4 or 5 African-American graduate students for the first time. And when I read the book, particularly, Kent's account of what it was like, I got to know the graduate students who were African-American very well because I actually dated one of them when she was started there. So I kind of had a little bit of a grasp of what it's like to be thrown in the lion's den. And essentially that's what it was. I mean, there was no preparation. There was no administrative sensitivity. It was like, oh, we've done our job. We recruited for African-American students and it's all good. And now it's on them to be successful. But if I'm an observer from the outside, but observing it, it's not that simple. It's never that simple. It's
I got the sense from talking to Fred Glim and also reading about the Times that you're right. They thought, well, once these young men come, then we're successful. It's over. They will never change us. We can just go on the way things have always been and be integrated.
I mean, that was sort of the whole philosophy of Harvard in general, in the sense that once they let you in, it was up to you to kind of sink or swim. I mean, given even the white students and all that. So
I'm not so sure about that, but
yeah, I mean, that's what I think anyway. But I mean, I think Harvard did prepare, like there were about 4 or 5 classmates from the South, and some of them did go to prep school for a summer or so, or
Freddie went through 2 years.
And Freddie, went through 2 years to prepare them for entering this the world of Harvard, this white world. But I mean, despite that, it was just we were really curiosities and really
maybe symbols.
Symbols, and it was like landing on the moon in a way.
Well, you described how strange you were, how the study that Ron Blau did, the research study, was just fascinating. So here you're in college and everybody's doing research, and this is before we had all of the board reviews and IRBs and things like that. So here's this kid who's a college kid. He wanted to interview all of the Negroes in the class, and he did this extensive study, Bright Shadows in the Yard. Tell me about that sociology study. You can't make this stuff up. This is
no, you can't make it up. And plus, reading it now, in 2022 or 2020, it's like infuriating. But I mean, at the time, the way it came about, I mean, everybody had to do a paper, and Ron, had to do a paper time, and his roommate, Jack, suggested that maybe he should do something on the sort of the social life of all of the Negro freshmen in the class. And Ron had sort of gotten this idea based on his sitting around with us at the black table, where we would tell these fantastical stories about our love life and dating and all that stuff. So Ron thought it would be an exciting story, but we finally, or I don't know if it was me or Jack, somebody convinced him that it was not enough there for a book or even a paper. And, he abandoned that idea and just sort of do this piece on who we were and why we came. But I mean, it was really racist then, and it's racist now. But I mean, at the time, we didn't really, it's just like we just talked to the guy and gave him whatever he wanted. There was one John Woodford who made fun of it, and
But in a nice way.
In a nice way,
he was
yeah.
cooperative, but he also, had his moments of sort of cringing or raising his eyebrows.
And Jeanne, your educational research, you were able to actually dig up the study, right?
Oh yeah.
And he was under the tutelage of a sociology professor, pretty famous fellow, David Reisman, who was kind of horrible, right? With his perceptions.
I think it was so lucky that I was able to find a page and a half typed, double-spaced response to Ron's paper from Reisman. And some of the questions he raised to Ron were worse than anything in the paper. He wondered, for example, and typed this out to Ron, I wonder if any of these boys really are intellectual. His assumptions were just, I don't think he knew any of you.
Right.
And the pathological denial of them, not for some reason thinking that they were lesser than, and that's bizarre, but that's 1963 and that's part of your book. This is the transition of what was going on at this time. Yeah.
And I went back to read some of the sources. I went to his bibliography and got those old books, and I thought, well, this was the accepted wisdom about what Negroes went through in their lives. It was edifying, but cringeworthy.
Yeah.
The other thought I have is you were all pretty bright young men. You went through advanced schools in New York City. Did you go to, not Brooklyn Tech, but to one of the advanced high schools?
Yeah, I went to Boys High, which is a pretty good school at the time.
School, and that you were all there because you deserved to be there. This wasn't lowering the standards just to kind of check a box off. You were all pretty remarkable young people.
Right.
So it, that's something that I think is important for people to know. Then you went, and the proof is in the pudding. Look how remarkably successful most of you are.
Right.
And it was the philosophy of the people that gave some of the money and some of the impetus to this at Harvard. It was their view that these guys were out there. They just had to go out and find them. There was no sense that they would have to change their standards. They just had to get more active in locating these guys, which they did.
Yeah, but for us, it was really everybody, at that time, I think the class was about 1,200 guys in the class. And the problem, not a problem, but the idea was that everybody was sort of smart and had excelled in high school or prep school. There were a number of legacy types, people who came because of their, parents and family had been at Harvard for many times. and that was their sort of key to getting in. But I mean, it was very tough going from getting A's, you know, in high school to getting a C or something at Harvard, because, you know, you're in this, what is there, a curve, a bell curve or something, or
Yeah, you're in a small, a bigger pond.
just a bigger pond. Yeah. I mean, that was very disturbing to me and to some of the other Black kids there.
I was listening to your documentary. I should link your short documentary in Venmo that, you know, was part of this, so people can get an idea. And one of your classmates, I forget who he was, made a statement that he had excellent training in segregated schools. And I had a very good friend, she's older than me, from Mississippi, Thelma Jackson. She's Dr. Thelma Jackson. She's just an icon in educational circles in Washington State. And we would work on research projects together. And she once said that I was not a victim of integrated schools. And I said, well, you mean segregated schools? She said, no, integrated. She said, our schools in Mississippi were taught by all Black instructors. They were the cream of the crop. They were remarkably, you know, we got a remarkably good education. And then when Brown v. Board of Education came through, it literally wiped out all of these very good smaller schools and created a very bad educational system. And
that was George Jones.
Oh, that was George Jones.
George Jones from Muskogee,
right,
Oklahoma, and his there is a really giant 2-volume history of that school, and exactly what you're saying was the case. It was a top-notch school for any place, any student.
Right.
And then they were forced to integrate. And
and then they fired fired a lot of these very qualified instructors that could have,
and passionate. I mean, the community in Muskogee put so much of their time, effort, money, and everything in making sure that school was just as good as they could make it.
Yeah, that's a success story, but the reality is that segregated schools were always underfunded. And so when you have a success story, it's a tribute to the people's dedication to reach those standards. But we should never lose sight of the fact that there should be equity and equality in schools. And that was denied segregated schools for the most part. You know, there were a number of people with historically Black colleges. They were educators in the North that felt strongly they'd go down, they'd supplement the staff. And of course, there are very bright people there too, but they had to struggle. I mean, that they had to really do twice as much to achieve the same result. And I think that's the great injustice that we really have to look at. It's,
the poor pay higher school taxes proportionally than the wealthy. It's an obscenity.
I was struck in reading the book. I think the only time I sensed that Kent was angry, really angry, and that was when the Harvard African-American, the Black Student Association was created. And the argument being by the administration, well, that's racist. And you remind us that Harvard had these clubs. I know Yale, Skull and Bones and all that nonsense, but I don't know what they were at Harvard, but which were legacy clubs and which were exclusive and which denied people. And yet, the first time someone from outside of the elites set something up and could be justified in terms of support system, it was denied. Please talk about that.
Well, the thing about that was so denied, it was just such hypocrisy. And they had the nerve to tell us that if we would change our charter from saying this was a club only, open to members, classmates of African and African-American heritage. If we would change that or take that out of our charter, it would be fine. And we,
Yeah, but you could still be all black.
it
You
could
just
still be
wouldn't
all
write
black,
it
you just wouldn't
down.
write it down, which was how those social clubs, the final clubs were. And we didn't want to deal with that hypocrisy. Plus, the other thing, the irony is that it wasn't like we were, wanting to go out and demonstrate or wanted to tear the buildings down or burn them down.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, yeah, but we just wanted to be able to invite some speakers in. And if you were sanctioned by Harvard, you could, you could solicit members during registration. You could use the Harvard buildings. There were funds for some of the clubs that you could, for the club that you could invite people in, that sort of thing. So our objectives were really sort of innocent, and which made us even more pissed off that they would object to that.
Yeah, well, what are fraternities? I was in a fraternity for a very short time, and they're kind of horrible in the way in which they.
Right.
It just was bad. And,
Right. Right.
So anyway, yeah, that was a interesting thing. But you talked about the black table.
Yeah.
I was an administrator in a school district, and there'd be 100 people at our retreats, all 100 principals, vice principals, directors. I was in an urban school, Tacoma. We had a black table, we still, when we would have our retreats, all of the principals would be together, and so it's those are some things that I think we're getting a lot better at, but we still have some ways to go on that. I don't know.
Right.
Your thoughts about that. The other thing I thought was so interesting about you, Kent, and two things. One is your grandfather was a dairy farmer, and you learned a lot from him. And he's South Carolina.
Yeah, and he was a beef farmer. He had beef cows, man. He had beef cows, and I'd go down there. My sister and I would go down there every summer, and that's where I think this sense of wanting to farm and be with the animals came from, probably.
Right.
Trips down there.
But tell the story about your dad and you being you would work for your dad waxing floors. Back then,
Right.
people would have to wax floors frequently. And your dad was a very powerful and proud young, older father. You had a lot of respect for him. And you were frustrated at how he would code switch when he would come into these homes, that he was such a powerful and strong person, and yet he would act subservient when he would come into these white people's homes. And you finally confronted him about that. Tell me about that story. I think that's.
Well, I mean, that when I was growing up, I mean, that would just drive me crazy. He would switch to this Uncle Tom sort of subservient kind of role. And when I talked to him about it later, he just said it was much later, really. Yeah, he was in his
he was in his
probably
80s by then.
But he, he said it was a matter of two things: business and a matter of that we were going into white people's houses and we were dealing with these white women, and you had to, be safe and non-threatening and that sort of thing, which I guess made sense at the time in terms of getting business, but it was just drove me crazy. I
Right.
It was a double face, the two faces of blacks and that sort of thing.
I got to ask you a question. It's a little bit off topic, but both of us are reading a book called White Malice. I don't know if you know the book. Susan Williams, White Malice.
No, I haven't seen it. No.
It's an incredible book. The CIA and the covert recolonization of Africa. And I've read a lot about that before, but this is really great detail. It's an investigative, scholarly work, and it essentially deals with Ghana and the early
Wow.
Ghana and Kenya and Congo and Lumumba in particular.
Yeah.
But it mentions CIA people who are co-opted. It's shocking how many people around Lumumba had been recruited or touched by the CIA, so on and so forth. won't go into that, but there's one particular individual who was an asset for the CIA who ended up at Harvard in 1959. I wondered if you encountered him. His name was
Ooh.
Washington Agre Jalongo Akumu. And he was Kenyan, and he came from, he was recruited by Front for the CIA to come to the States.
Mhm.
It was actually legitimately liberationist and as a Pan-Africanist. So,
Mhm.
but he was used by the CIA. But he ended up in the International Student Relations Seminar, ISRS at Harvard. It's all recounted in a book called Patriotic Betrayal. You may want to read that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was a CIA operation, essentially.
Mhm.
And then he became a student at Harvard in 1959. So
Wow, I'll have to look that up.
An undergrad, do you know?
yes, an
An
undergraduate.
undergrad.
Yeah, yeah. The other names mentioned was Ted Harris. He was in charge of that program. He was a CIA employee, National Student Association, that Harvard program, and some other people. You might find it interesting
Yeah. Yeah.
to read about it. And Akuma, though, has a long history after that as well. But
Yeah.
the author couldn't help but mention that Harvard was a very friendly place to the CIA, that's where a lot of people
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, one of the
work.
guys in our class, we didn't, I don't think we didn't put it in the
We
book.
didn't put it in the
He
book
didn't want
because
us
he
to.
asked us not to.
But a guy says that he was associated with or in the CIA and,
Yeah.
was
He was
sort
the
of,
Cuban guy. I think we can say it now.
yeah,
He has
yeah,
died.
he was a guy from Cuba.
I assume that he might be. That's just
Yeah.
by the nature of the era and the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was his capacity being a college student working for the CIA, keeping a track on what was
Yeah, I think it was keeping track on us and
on
when I
your
on the
classmates?
class. I mean, to make sure everybody on us, on the 18 of us. I think that was his job. And he said, told us off camera, didn't want us to put it in the book. But now when I think about it, he was the only guy that wore three-piece suits all the time. And that was the key. I mean,
And
should
had
have
a little
known.
ear thing in his ear. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, he didn't do a very good job keeping Malcolm X out of the cafeteria.
Right,
Tell me
right.
about Malcolm X.
That's true, yeah. Well, he luckily he came to I mean, he was really influenced I think most of us. And he came to a dinner in Elliott House, which was one of the houses where I lived. And we had a dinner and he spoke, and he was really totally different in many ways than he was when you saw him when he gave his speeches and that sort of thing. But it was really great, and it was a great evening. And there was as I recall, an argument that happened between him and the white professor who was leading the dinner and all that. And it had to do with Martin Luther King and the fact that Martin Luther King, this FBI information had come out about Martin Luther King's extramarital activity and all that. So there's a big argument about that, and they were going to, call down to Martin Luther King right from the dinner and get but he was able to work that out and dissipate the argument, which was really, we all were very impressed by that.
Yeah,
But-
to see a black man take down. a
Yeah,
professor.
right. And plus, we'd never heard a black person talk about white people that way. I mean, that was like, wow, that was like revolutionary. We were all impressed by that. But throughout the whole college, the 4 years, there was increasing pressure as to what we were going to do. Our classmates in the South are getting jailed and punished, and here we are in this sort of, and killed, and here we are in this Harvard bubble. And it really was a bubble. I mean, it was any kind of racism was really very subtle and very overt.
Right.
In fact, it happened.
I
And,
think behind closed doors.
yeah, behind
too.
closed doors, I guess. And
Well, that'd be, getting in a dust up with Malcolm X would be like, getting in a road rage and the guy getting out of the car is Mike Tyson. You just
Right,
that's
right.
not a good choice. I don't
not a good
think.
choice. Right.
I was
Right.
impressed with the scholarship because one of your classmates was from Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my
I
roommate.
very carefully read the section on Pittsburgh and his roots, and they're exactly on the money. Sugar Top, which is a
Yeah.
Yeah.
area in the Hill District here in Pittsburgh. And I shared this story with a retired gynecologist friend of mine, an African-American, very light-skinned guy from Florida. And his wife lived in Sugar Top. So we were talking about it, and he's going to check it all out in detail. But I do know Shenley High School well. My youngest daughter went to Shenley High School before it was closed.
Oh,
Oh,
And,
really? Wow.
yeah, so it's true to the discussion of the setting is very true. It's exactly.
Well, that's
captured.
good because
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us has ever been to Pittsburgh. Jack was good at, and Jack's brother. told
Jack's
us
brother
all that
told us
stuff,
about
yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, you captured it very well, very nicely.
Oh, good,
Great.
good. That's good. Yeah.
Another classmate that I thought was very interesting is Lowell Davidson.
Yeah.
You bet.
This is a fellow that's well, you shouldn't throw this word around lightly, but I would say probably genius level, with
Yeah.
his
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
a biochemist, a pianist, a bass player, a drummer,
An athlete.
a remarkable athlete.
Yeah.
And yet he suffered from mental illness. Obviously, it seems probably.
Yes.
I don't know what the diagnosis would be, but it'd be schizophrenia or maybe bipolar with manic psychotic features. He was just a brilliant
Yeah. Yeah.
fellow. Tell us about him.
I mean, I didn't really know him that well. I mean, he and I had a few, I guess, conversations, but I mean, and I listened to his music a bit.
Right.
And yeah, he was really brilliant. I mean, he was, where did he come from? A pretty fundamentalist.
Oh, yes, it's
church
very,
background.
some fundamentalist evangelical, fringe sort of
Yeah.
religious group his parents were into. Fire, there's the word fire was in it, I forget what it was, but we did try to talk to as many people we could find who knew him. And yeah, he had demons as well as,
Right.
his stellar intellect.
I mean, the funny thing about the book is that he made one recording, Lowell Davidson trio, and the drummer on it, Milford Graves, was the guy I'd gone to high school with.
Oh,
And
What a surprise that was.
yeah, we both went to Boys High, and we both lived in Queens at the time. And I would ride the bus with him every morning and the subway to get to Brooklyn, where Boys High was. And it was just very ironic that he was on the same album with him. But and actually, we thought about trying to do a book,
We did.
another book on Lowell, but we just couldn't
There's
get.
just so little.
Yeah, there's not many people left that knew
Right.
him. And plus, I mean, the music is very sort of avant-garde and abstract, and I just couldn't understand it. I mean, I'm not a very.
Right. I think it should be, if it's done, it should be done by someone who understands the music, because it was so central to who he was.
Yeah.
I don't think we put it in the book, but one of our respondents said that the last time he saw Lowell, he was on the street just pulling in other homeless people and giving them music lessons about this music that he was so taken by. And it was, I don't know if you've ever listened to
I
the
did. I
music,
listened to the
but
whole
it is-
album. It's a little ethereal. It's
Yeah, It's not
But he
accessible.
hooked up with Ornette Coleman, and
Right,
I mean,
right.
he's like a real
That,
legitimate.
their label, that's ESP disc label.
That's right.
Right, yeah,
It was, it began as an Esperanto disc, and it came in at a particular
Oh.
juncture when the so-called avant-garde or free jazz movement was really growing.
right,
It was the cutting edge of that. Pharoah Sanders was ESP
Right.
1002, and Archie Shepp was on it. All the free jazz players were on it. I didn't know the album. I still don't know it, but Gary Peacock was the bass player. Milford
Yeah.
Graves is a icon of free jazz, and but most of those people, most of the folks that were engaged in that were totally dedicated, like him,
yeah,
not
Yeah.
alone, and ended up when they weren't making music, driving a taxi cab or waiting on tables
Right.
or struggling, but they were totally dedicated to where that music was going at that
Yeah.
juncture. So I've got all those old discs. I don't have his. I got to find that one.
yeah. And actually on the 23-minute sort of sample trailer we did, we used his music.
I could tell. Yeah. That's right. We're having Gerald Horn on in 2 weeks. He wrote a book on jazz,
Oh, really?
and,
Yeah.
and that's
Jazz and
it-
politics.
yeah, it's very, very good book. I have a confession to make. I didn't know who Gerald Horn was until we had him on, and then all of a sudden I started looking at his work and his production, and I realized that I'm a complete idiot. That that
Me
he
too.
is one of our premier historians of our time, and I who? So
Yeah. yeah.
anyway, I'm smarter than I was a year ago. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, how
good.
do you, I mean, you guys really read the books though. I mean, that's really.
Oh yeah.
wonderful to talk to,
We started by sharing books back and forth, and then I said, well, why don't we do a podcast? Then we started asking people to be on our podcast, and
yeah.
and we've had really just wonderful people stopping by, and so that's half
I mean, how are you able to read all the books? I mean, are you guys as fast readers, or how do you do that?
I think Pat cheats because I can't keep up with him. I come too fast. I think he's got a guide somewhere that has a summary of it all that he pretends he read them, because he just devours books. But you got to read this, and he'll say, "I'm halfway through it," and I start it and I struggle through it.
Well, I will tell you a confession. I have a pretty bad learning disability and struggle reading. So I have all of these. So I discovered that if I listen to books on tape, I retain them at a level that's actually pretty darn good.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I have a scanner that I use that set up that scans the books. I can scan a book in about 20 minutes, and I read. I go on 4-mile walks a day, and I'll read a couple books a week. So that's my and the funny thing is I am so auditory in how I process information. Greg is completely the opposite. If I send him a YouTube video, he'll say, just send me the transcript. I don't, he can't take things in. You know about all that, Jeanne, with your study of education, how some people just have different ways of processing information, and it takes a while for them to figure it out. So
But what a rich story that book is. It really was captivating.
Great.
Again, I missed the index because I wanted to go back as I was going through it and reconnect with people.
Yeah.
What did Ken say about them? What was discussed earlier? So
Yeah.
I don't want to harp on it, but that's how good the book is. I mean, there are a lot of books that don't deserve indexes.
right.
That book is really very, very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I one last thing. You've got a great podcast, you two, with
Yeah. I'm not.
you
I'm
don't
not
do
about the
you're
no.
on it occasionally though, aren't you, Jeanne?
No, I don't think I ever have.
Oh, so
No,
that's
it's
his
just-
thing. That's his
That's
thing.
his-
Washes her
Yeah.
hands of Ken's podcast.
I mean, the problem with our podcast is that we do it once a week and it goes so fast, it's tough to read the books. I mean, I have to really try and increase my reading speed. But I mean, luckily, we usually get about 14, 15 people on a call, on a Zoom podcast
Yours
call.
aren't all authors, are they?
No, and sometimes they're not, yeah, they're
just
not
people
authors,
who-
they're just politicians. and
Activists and
activists.
politicians.
But I mean, it's fun to do, and it's good to have, you know, all of the 14 people on the call usually know something about the subject, so we keep it going. But I mean, I really like doing it, and you know, it's fun.
I like how you disagree with each other respectfully and in a fun way, and can call each other out and change your opinions. And I don't know, it just is. It's a great podcast, very eclectic, different subjects.
Good.
And of course, Greg, you're a friend of the show, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I've been
several
honored to
times.
be on it. I really enjoy it. They're challenging and they are fun. Well, you have a project planned? I mean, you're so young and dynamic, the two of you. Surely you have numerous projects you're looking forward to.
No, we don't.
No, I'm trying to write a novel. I mean, that's like, it's sort of,
That's sort of like
Out
farming,
there.
isn't it?
huh? Yeah, it's like farming,
farming,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's like farming, yeah.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I mean, I just, yeah, I'm not sure what to do next. I mean, I do a news show on every Friday from a network news show.
Oh,
So
really?
I've been doing that. Yeah, it's called the 801, and it's on WIOX radio.org, which is a local station here, but we go out on the internet. So I do that once a week.
Give me the call
My,
letters again. Give me the call
oh,
letters.
WIOX
Okay.
91.3.
91.3 FM WIOX, and we stream on WIOXradio.org.
Okay.
And-
Good.
And it's pretty much so I do a Friday morning show every week.
And for the last 14 years, I've given free English and Spanish lessons to anybody who needs them.
Oh, that's good. That's
And
good.
Kent has been helping me with it.
Yeah, we have a pretty growing Hispanic community up
Mhm.
here in upstate New York. So
And you're in Mexico, how long each year? You go there for a few weeks, a month? When you go to the-
Depends. Some years we've gone for I think the longest we stayed was about 3 months.
about 3 months, yeah.
And the shortest is about 3 weeks. So,
Yeah.
but we haven't been. in
We
a
haven't
long
been
time
because of
it-
COVID. We're hoping
Right.
to get down there in November.
Are you both bilingual or just you, Jeanne?
Just Jeanne.
That's all you need is just one.
Yeah.
That
I'm learning.
Good.
But when we get shaken down by the police, I'm like, you've got to handle this once. And I'm not going to always do this.
I know. So one last question: who was more fun to work with, Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw?
Oh, that's a good question.
Tom
Or can-
Brokaw.
Oh, Tom was.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, he was he was calmer, less frenetic. And plus he had a real interest in cows. And that's what we will talk about all the time, cows.
Cows.
I'm
Cows.
really
Yeah.
surprised at that. I didn't.
Yeah, I guess he came from Montana or one of those, but his family had been in cows and farming and all that. So we talked a lot about cows.
my father was from Brooklyn, and he was a dreamer, always kind of did different things. We were military, and so we were stationed in central Tennessee, and he decided he was going to buy a small farm when we were in central Tennessee and have cows.
Uh-huh.
And it lasted 2 weeks until he realized how hard it was
Really?
to do twice. So the beloved, nice old farmer who was next to us, Archie Mac Todd, just sort of benevolently took over the milking and the managing of our cows. But that's how stupid you can be if you're raised in Brooklyn. The first cow he saw, he was 20 years old at the Brooklyn Zoo. You know, he didn't know, but
Well,
that's-
Kent actually was talking about writing a book called Farming While Black and Stupid.
No, because my idea
For
was
a
to,
lot of
what I was
mistakes.
going to do was my idea was to start the farm. And first off, cows are really great animals in the sense that they really have, I started off with sheep, and you look into the eyes of the sheep and there's nothing there. But when you
Right.
look into the eyes of a cow, you see some personality and all that stuff. And so and I was actually one of the first organic farmers in the county here. So it was
Huh.
all organic. We had 23 cows. They were called Ashers, which is a Scottish breed. Yeah, the good climbers. It was a hill farm.
But you were going to farm with a
Oh,
team.
well, yeah, I was
horse-
going to farm with
team of horses.
no machines on the farm. So I bought
Oh
these
God.
work horses,
Feudal
those
farm.
Percheron horses, and I would spread manure with the horse team and all that. And again, it got very hard, and I had runaways on the horses. I mean, these horses would this idea of a workhorse is really not the right term. I mean,
They don't wanna
workhorses
work.
do not want to work, and I had a lot of adventures with those, adventures with the cows getting out, and I mean, it was. So I think it would make for a good book. That's the other thing. I might
Yeah, that.
make comedy.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you too. This has just been a real treat for me, and I know for you too, Greg. We've
you.
been wanting to have you on. I'll link to your podcast and books and some other things below, and just keep up the good work. Keep working together. You're a good
I'll
team.
let you know if we think of another.
Yeah, and if you need some backstory on how people are idiots with cows, then I can give you.
I'll tell you about chickens. I know all about chickens.
Oh God. Anyway, there you go. All right, thank you guys.
All right, thank
Real
you.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yeah.